The Vikings were a group of warriors and explorers famous in history, originally from the Scandinavian areas of Northern Europe during the period spanning from the 8th to the 11th century AD. The lives of the Vikings were full of adventure and excitement, and their epic sea voyages and discoveries of new lands were an indispensable part of their Viking ships, known as drakar, were considered an engineering marvel of the Middle Ages, as they were used in trade and conquests across the seas. These ships were stable and powerful, which allowed the Vikings to reach distant places and take them over effortlessly. Their culture was characterized by many unique aspects, including their religious beliefs, which encompassed myths and gods like Odin and Thor and played an important role in their daily lives and adventures. Do justice to the Vikings? This is a question worth examining deeply, because history doesn't stop at the pages of joy and achievements. It should be understood in all its aspects. The Nordic Germanic peoples, known as the Norsemen, roamed the regions of Northern Europe and were called the term Viking, which comes from the word Vik in the languages of the northern regions, means small bay, and it's likely that the Viking name was derived from an area in Norway known as Viken, their homeland. Historically, these people, known for navigation and piracy, didn't have a name of their own like Viking, but this name became associated with them over the years and didn't appear officially in historical records until the mid-10th century AD. The Vikings from the 8th to the 11th centuries, leaving a significant mark on European history. World seas and ruled the waters with their famous ships, controlling vast areas from Western Europe to Central Asia. Orientations and goals, as they divided into three main branches. The Swedes, who navigated the Baltic Sea and explored Russian routes, the Norwegians, who took over parts of eastern England and Ireland, and the Danes, who invaded southern Andalusia, settled in northern Morocco and even southern Italy, and launched their attacks on Constantinople. The legacy of the Vikings is evident in a history full of adventure and challenges, as they pioneered the exploration of the world and the expansion of their control. Despite some hostilities, their legacy is an integral part of the development of European and global civilization in that historical period. Vikings began their era with tragic events, with their first recorded appearance in 793, when they sailed to an island called Linsfarne in the northeastern kingdom of Northumbria. They were accompanied by about 100 heavily armed men. It is said that the leader of this horrific expedition may be the legendary figure in Norse literature, Ragnar Lothbrok. Usually targeted the monastery, which was a religious and cultural center and was famous for its wealth. Viking warriors stumbled upon a quiet monastery full of peaceful monks and treasures of gold and silver. These riches were considered treasures and spoils after they had killed and brutally mistreated the monks, even going so far as to crucify one of the older monks. This gruesome crime by the Vikings left a terrifying mark on the country. Alcuin of York's vivid description of the horrific massacre he witnessed is undeniable, as he said, "We have never seen such terror in Britain as we do now with the pagans. The blood of the saints was spilled around the altar, and their bodies were dragged in the temple like trash in the streets." These words capture the horror of what occurred and left its bloody and horrific impact on the land. northern coasts of England escalated, described by English monks as wolf attacks among sheep. These attacks Yet, while medieval English records often depicted the Vikings as nothing but criminals and predators, this view is not entirely complete. Despite the violence perpetrated by the Viking in some cases, the attacks also carried other targets far from the thirst for blood and the ongoing wars. The invasions were aimed at getting rich through booty, hostage trading, territorial expansion, and securing power and control over resources, and thus these attacks can be understood as part of a broader historical context that includes political, economic, and social conflicts in that period. At the time, the Scandinavian country was experiencing a steady increase in population, which led to increasing pressure on natural resources and agricultural land. Soil, which sometimes led to famine and food shortages. Along with these economic and environmental factors, cultural beliefs played a role in stimulating the Viking people's desire to. They believed that the world was confined to their domain, but by expanding their vision, sailing across the seas was aided by the development of shipbuilding. Thanks to these advancements, they managed to widen their sphere of influence and take control of new territories, which drove them to explore distant lands and travel vast distances across the sea. Were enough of a reason for most Vikings to kill anyone who didn't share their beliefs or worship their gods. This could explain the repeat of their barbaric attacks on churches. However, we must acknowledge that despite the bloody legacy the Vikings left behind, some of them did have a peaceful side to their life. Many Vikings in Europe led peaceful lives where they farmed, traded, and assimilated into the communities they settled in. They had trade and cultural relations with other peoples and were influenced by their cultures and ways of life too. The Viking religion before they adopted Christianity was marked by the worship of many gods and a belief in myths and historical. Among these gods was Odin, who had several forms like the god of war, wisdom, and death. The Vikings also revered several other gods to whom they turned for help and protection. The Vikings also had a view of paradise they called Valhalla, where they believed if they died heroically in battle, they would get to live next to Odin, enjoying a life full of glory and fun in the palace of the gods. They also expected to face challenges and battles in Valhalla, including confronting evil giants led by Loki. Some also took on other professions like fishing, shipbuilding, and trade. These traders sailed the seas in search of wealth and exchanged goods with other peoples, helping to expand their influence and spread their culture across distant regions. During that time, Scandinavia's economy was mostly based on farming, with a short growing season being enough to meet people's needs for grain, livestock feed, and other supplies. Since most people lived along the coasts, fishing and sea trade played a big role in their lives. Even before the Vikings showed up and started raiding, European markets were interested in raw materials coming from the North Sea and the Baltic, with items like fur, timber, and slaves being major traded goods between Scandinavia and the rest of Europe. Thanks to this diverse economy and trade, Scandinavia was able to build a strong and varied economy. These factors helped boost culture and cultural exchange between the people in the region and the rest of Europe. The Vikings had a big impact on the development of languages in the areas they settled, as their Old Norse language had an alphabet of 16 characters. This language had an influence on the creation of modern languages in Sweden, Denmark. Today, the Icelandic language is considered the closest to Old Norse and is still in use. Among the prominent Vikings was Rollo, who converted to Christianity and adopted a different life from his previous life as a Viking leader, although he converted to Christianity but did not stop the attacks, as he was considered the chief of the Vikings. Belgium. These facts represent the differences and diversity in lifestyles and beliefs among Viking individuals and the transformations they have undergone over time. In 911, an agreement was signed between Rollo, the Viking leader, and the French King Charles. Under this agreement, Rollo was granted control of the Normandy region in northern France, and Viking rule in France began ever since. After that, the period between 1066 and 1140 witnessed the rule of the Vikings in England, where the Vikings won the Battle of Hastings in 1666, and Harold was crowned as King of England. A number of Viking brother kings followed his conquests of England. At the beginning of the 9th century, kingdoms included Northumbria, Wessex, Mercia, and East Anglia. Monasteries were on wealth-rich, poorly defended coasts, and the area of Lindisfarne, which we talked about earlier, became a prime target for Viking raids. After several invasions and successes in England, Ragnar invaded Paris in 845 AD. He gathered a fleet of 120 longships, swiftly sailed up the rivers of Paris, and destroyed the coastal villages. Faced Charles the Bald's army and defeated them soundly. France then paid tribute to the Vikings in exchange for peace, not war. Silver. Cunning and a successful leader. However, even as Ragnar aged, the thrill of victory still flowed through. He decided to invade Northumbria to prove he was still a strong king. Indeed, Ragnar's Vikings advanced and clashed with King Aella's army, but they were outnumbered, resulting in a terrible defeat for the Vikings. He was captured and tortured until he landed in a snake-filled pit, where he uttered his famous line, "How my children will scream when they hear the wolf has fallen into the pit." This marked the end of the legendary leader Ragnar and the beginning of his son's quest for revenge. Let me tell you the names of Ragnar's sons. First, there's Bjorn, the child of Ragnar's first wife, who had no other children, while his other sons came from also known as Boneless, a nickname due to his brittle legs that left him unable to walk, but he was still the most dangerous of them all. Their third son was Sigurd Snake in the Eye. This name came from a snake-like mark on his eye. The fifth one was Havitserk, and the last was a son named Ragnar. The existence of this child is simple. His son was Ragnar's only son. Didn't exist. But right now we're going to talk about Bjorn, because history has witnessed fierce yet limited battles between the Vikings and the Muslims. The Viking invasion of Andalusia began from the west, setting out from the coasts of England in their longships, reaching Lisbon with 54 large ships carrying thousands of ferocious fighters. 50 large ships carrying thousands of fierce warriors. This campaign saw fierce battles between the Vikings and Muslims in the region. In the city there was a young priest named Alfonso who was against Islamic rule and defiant. During the Viking occupation of the city, Alfonso helped the Vikings by giving them information about the city's weaknesses, which made it easy for them to get into the city. Vikings committed acts of violence and looted, then left after 13 days due to strong resistance from Abdullah ibn Hazm and the city's people. At that time, Andalusia was under the Umayyad rule, led by Abd al-Rahman al-Awsat, and when he found out Seville was in Viking hands, he quickly sent his forces to rescue the city, led by Abdullah and Muhammad ibn Rostam. Armies from all over Andalusia joined the fight against the Vikings. But the Norsemen weren't alone. They got new support and fought many battles where they managed to outmaneuver the united Andalusian forces. And so the wave of Viking invasions continued in the region after the decisive Battle of Teblada, which happened in the village of Taliata. The course of events changed drastically. And 30 of their ships were set on fire. The captives were treated barbarically as the Andalusians killed many and crucified others right in front of the surviving Vikings. After suffering these major losses, the Vikings had to retreat back to their remaining ships, and when the Andalusians chased them, the Vikings offered a ransom to get back their captives and make peace. Following these bloody events, the Vikings asked for a truce and peace with the Umayyads, and both parties agreed to a settlement that ended the fights and brought peace. During the Abbasid era, especially under the rule of Caliph Harun al-Rashid, trade blossomed between the Arab lands and the peoples of Europe, including the Viking. Trade typically happened through a barter system where goods were exchanged between the two parties. The Vikings used to offer goods like fur, honey, leather, ivory, and fish, and they had a particular interest in getting Scandinavian goods from the Vikings. They were, for instance, keen on getting hats and coats made from black fox fur, which was considered one of the most expensive kinds of fur at the time. There's some evidence indicating that the Vikings made it to other parts beyond northern Europe, like North Africa, Palestine, and even Baghdad. However, the might of the Islamic Empire at the time made it tough for the Vikings to take over those lands in the Arab East, since the Islamic Empire had massive military and organizational power, which made any venture into those areas challenging and risky. To a point where their naval and military epics came to a standstill. Indeed, this thrilling chapter of Scandinavian history wrapped up after the deadly Battle of Stamford Bridge in 1066, where the Norwegian King Harald III faced a crushing defeat. Some folks reckon that the Viking Age in Scandinavia ended with the establishment of ruling authority in those countries and the acceptance of Christianity as the engineering and agricultural skills, along with a significant leap occurred in navigation and shipbuilding, with their ships roaming the seas over long distance. The story of the Vikings, famous for their brutality in warfare and prowess in planning, concludes with a legacy that spans various aspects of life. Even though their era of military dominance has ended, their impact on history and culture is still recognized today, with their engineering and agricultural legacy continuing to be remembered and studied. If you, my friend, enjoy learning about mysterious historical figures, then let me tell you, you're in the right place to keep up with our videos. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and don't forget to activate the bell icon with another historical figure.